the live stream of the event. Awesome. Okay, thank you, Jolly. And welcome everyone to the New York City Accessibility Meetup. So happy you all joined today. We're here with Idan Meir, and we are going to get kicked off here in a second. Before we start, I wanted to give a little background. New York City Accessibility Meetup has been around for a few years now. I think many of you are probably regulars, but welcome to newcomers. We live stream and caption all of our events. More recently, obviously, we've been hosting our events virtually. But follow us on our YouTube page, join our Meetup group, and you can keep track of upcoming events and speakers. So then one other note, we have, I wanted to say thank you to Equal Entry, who's sponsoring the event. Thomas Logan, who is also a co-host, couldn't be here today because he's in Japan and he's sleeping. But I know that I personally am very grateful for Equal Entry's support. If you'd like to support the Meetup and sponsor in any way, you can reach out through the Meetup group and DM. Also like to thank the Internet Society of New York. Jolly works with them. He's doing our audiovisual and all things tech for this Meetup, including the recordings and orchestrating the captioning, etc. Final note, Diane Scott with White Coat Captioning is doing the live captions today. So thank you, Diane. Okay, so on that note, I'm so excited to welcome you, Idan. I'd like to hand it over to you, and please take it away.
Yeah, sure. So thank you, Cameron, and thank you, Thomas, although you're not here, and all the rest of the team. I'm a big fan and follower on accessibility in New York City for a few years. I even been to one physical meetup about a year and a half ago, which was a great experience for me. And I guess it's good morning, good noon to some of you. It's good evening here in Israel. I'm speaking from a city called Ra'anana. It's about 20 minutes from Tel Aviv, just like the whole country. But I'm here today to talk with you about the topic of accessible wayfinding systems. We'll start a new era of accessibility. Just a few words before, I just told Cameron earlier, I found it as, I guess, the first time I'm actually giving a lecture online. I've done a lot of them physically, but now I just realized that it's the first time I actually do it online. And this is the first time I'm doing this specific lecture in general. So I hope you'll enjoy it. I hope you'll find it worthwhile. I hope it will be interesting to all of you. I've done my best. And let's just get things started. I do also want to welcome you to ask me anything along the lecture or the talk. Let's just call it a talk, a conversation. Feel free to kind of interrupt me in the middle. By the way, that's the Israeli way of communication, interrupting each other. So no worries. Feel free to ask me, whether it's via the chat over here or just raise hand, and I'm happy to kind of give you to listen to you. So I hope you hear me well. I see everything's fine. So I'm Idan. I'm Idan Meir, 34 years old. I'm living here in Ra'anana, as I said. I'm a father of Abigail and Rani, 3 years old and 1 year old. And prior to RightHear, and aside of playing guitars every once in a while, I've been a student at the Open University here in Israel. I've learned business and psychology. Before RightHear, I co-founded a place called Habanana, which is one of the first hub startups for web and mobile startups here in Israel outside of Tel Aviv. And in the past 4.5 years, I'm the CEO of RightHear, and we're going to talk a little bit about RightHear along this conversation as part of talking about audible wayfinding systems. But in a nutshell, RightHear is an audible wayfinding system that turns public spaces into more accessible environments, mostly for people who are blind or visually impaired, but basically for anyone with orientation challenges. I get into that because my life is a story of getting lost. I'm getting lost everywhere I go basically. I'm one of those guys that when you go with them to a new place, so if it's a hotel, for example, I'll walk, let's say, right out from the elevators when it's left, and I'll keep on doing that for the rest of the week or whatever, because I'm always getting lost. So my familiarity with the frustration of not knowing where you are and how to reach your destination is kind of the story of my life, although I'm saying great. So this is a little bit about how I got into this. Basically, Gil and myself, we were working on a whole different concept in the beginning. It was with a couponing and shopping experience in malls. And after we realized that we're working great together and that we have a great technology in hands, we were looking also for something that is more meaningful, more purposeful, with better, I would say, social impact within it. I was also looking to kind of scratch my own itch, which is getting lost. And those combined basically was the born of RightHear. As I said, it's an audible wayfinding system. Again, I don't want to really discuss us or pitching RightHear today. I've done it the whole day today, and I'm sure you're not here for that. But in a nutshell, as I said, it's a system that has a mobile app. It's a free mobile app, Android and iPhone. It also have an online portal for the venue to control. And all in all, it basically allows our users to receive audible descriptions about the environment, answering to questions like, where am I? What is here? What's around me? Who can I call for help? And more features like that. For those of you who are watching us through YouTube, you can just search for RightHear on YouTube. And for the rest, you can just look around after that. Okay. Let's talk. The main topic, as I said, of today is about the new era that the audible wayfinding systems will start. This is the way, at least, that I believe in. And in the next, I don't know, 30 minutes, 40 minutes, maybe an hour, as much as we need, we're going to discuss it in a bit more details. We're going to talk a little bit about the present, about the future, about the technologies that are involved, about the main challenges with this domain, and I will try to kind of share with you some case studies along the way from what I've been able to learn or even actually personally experience with that in the past 4.5 years. All right, moving on. By the way, I hope I'll be able to see raising hands if there will be such, but if not, Cameron, I'm sure you'll be able to help me with that. So I'll just move forward. Talking about people with orientation challenges, we can break it down. Not only people tend to think, okay, audible wayfinding system, that's only for the blind or visually impaired, people with some sort of sight impairment, but that's not true. That's just part of the picture. People with orientation challenges are also people with sometimes cognitive disability or even mental disability. From our research, there is about 5.4% out of the population. It's our research, so it's not exactly accurate, to be honest, but this is what we've been able to crunch the numbers. And we're talking about 18 million people in the US alone. So what do we have for these people who have some sort of orientation challenges at the moment? When we go to the mall, well, in the past year, we didn't done that so much, of course. We didn't go to the mall too much or didn't go outside too much. But if you can remember in the normal days when we go to public spaces, whether it be the university, the workplace, or the shopping mall, for example, what do we have there for those with orientation challenges? As far as I know, and I'm happy to hear more thoughts here, but there's mainly two main things. One is tactile paving on the ground, and secondly is tactile and braille signage. That's what we basically have to offer as society and public spaces for, again, people who are people with orientation challenges, or more specifically, people who are blind or visually impaired. To understand that, to understand how effective is it, I would like to share with you this fact that I'm pretty sure that many of you probably already know, where it's a group of professionals in accessibility. So I'm pretty sure that many of you know that, but for those who doesn't, only 10% out of the blind community know to read Braille. Well, so if that's the number, so that puts us in a very challenging situation, because for those 10% who actually know to read Braille, I always say they have to be one, very lucky, secondly, very brave, and thirdly, very, very smart. Why is that? Lucky, because they first need to know where the sign is, right? To be able to read it, they have to touch it, so they need to know where the sign is. Secondly, they have to be very brave. Why is that? Because who want to touch a public surface, right? Nobody want to touch a public surface, specifically not in nowadays. And thirdly, very, very smart, because even if you know what the sign is, even if you know to read Braille, even if you know, if they have, being brave enough to touch it, ultimately what you'll get is something like room 210, which doesn't say a lot about where you are in relation to the environment. So all in all, there is not a very effective solution for that. And people who are blind or visually impaired, or again, with other orientation challenges, are basically blocked from public spaces as far as we understand that. And when we ask them, how do you get to the specific store? How do you get to the specific classroom? The answer is always with somebody. It could be their family members or friends or anyone else, but it's always with somebody. And when we think about it, accessibility is about independence, right? It's all about providing independence. That independent, or the need for that independent, has been increased dramatically in the past year. Why is that? Because aside of not being able or not want to touch a public surface, as we mentioned with the Braille, there's another thing called social distancing. So if a year ago you would go to that department store or shopping mall, or again, whatever it is, a museum, with somebody, now there's not necessarily that somebody that will go with you. You have to find your way to do it by yourself, independently. That's put a lot of challenges. That put a lot of that's put the need in a new situation. I would call it that way, and that's one of the reasons why I believe personally that audible wayfinding system will be everywhere by 2025. Now, I know it's recorded. I know it's on YouTube. I hope I won't embarrass myself in a few years. But, this is what I believe. I believe whether it's be 2025 or 2026, maybe a bit later. But in the near future, in the near coming years, public spaces will have some sort of audible wayfinding system. I don't see, by the way, the captions, but I'll slow down for the caption error. So to prove that claim that the audible wayfinding system will be everywhere in the next few years, I would like to share with you three main reasons for that. The first one is regulation. In countries like here in Israel, having talking signs or having audible wayfinding system is already obligated. Businesses, companies, institutions are already obligated for a few years, actually, to have some sort of voice sign or vocal sign or talking sign. I didn't know how to exactly translate that into English. All of you can see here on the right side of the screen is basically my translation to how the regulation is written here in Israel in Hebrew. What it basically says that buildings that are welcoming more than 500 people should have some sort of audible wayfinding system, or should have talking sign. This talking sign should be at the entrance. They should be next to the elevators, and they should also be in the information centers. Now, obviously, that's not a full coverage of the building. That not necessarily gives a full independence experience for a blind or visually impaired visitor, but it's an obligation that required all public spaces, whether if it's a university, a hospital, a museum, a shopping mall. And as I said, there's a lot of examples of places that are open for all of us. On the left side, by the way, what you can see, I think I see some thing in the chat. Let me just, yes, there are some questions in the chat. So I'll do a pause and read some of the questions in a minute, okay? just so I can kind of reply or answer that, or I can maybe do that at the end. Anyway, on the left side of the slide, what you can see is actually a recommendation. Specifically in this case, is RightHear, but in some other cases, it can be other solutions in the layout, specifically in the planning of the layout of a new building. The consultant, the accessibility consultant of that specific project, have integrated RightHear from the planning part of the building. Saying that the awareness, at least the awareness and the understanding, as well as the obligatory of doing that, is already here in Israel for the past at least 2 or 3 years in the market. And we're pretty sure that it's going to happen in more markets. We see that happening in a few other countries. And I believe it will also be in some format or another in the USA in the next few years. So this is one reason why we believe that audible wayfinding system will be ubiquitous in 2025, up to 2025. I'll do a quick pause just to see your comments or thoughts here. Yes. Okay. Cameron, actually, that would be helpful if you could, from time to time, just to read it out loud, so that it will be just make
Yeah,
it,
of course.
smoother. Is there anything there?
I'll synthesize a couple of points. Having an audio solution like what you're describing in a public space that's sort of speaker might not be accessible to someone who's deafblind, for example.
Correct.
And
Correct.
also would be inaccessible to someone who speaks a different language.
Correct. So we usually don't, like with RightHear system, for example, everything that is being out loud can also be read through the smartphone as well. It's also with text. And secondly, it's all translated to, at the moment, 26 different languages. But yes, that's a good point, and I'm happy you put it out. Anything else before I move on?
Yeah, quick question about integrating these sort of voice announcements with mapping applications. I have a feeling this lines up with here.
Yes, and we'll get back to the technicalities of things a bit later. But yes, we'll get back to. I hope I'll answer that a bit later. If not, we'll get back to that. All right, cool. So the first, again, back to the flow. The first reason why I believe that audible wayfinding systems will be everywhere by 2025 is because the regulation is looking at it and is strict into that more and more, not just here in Israel, but also in other countries. And that's the first reason. The second reason is the speed of technology. I kind of use here an image by Boston Dynamics, copyright to Bob O'Connor. And this is, for those of you, I guess many of you are already familiar with Boston Robotics kind of robots dogs. Who knows? That might be the next guiding dog. Who knows? I mean, this type of new technologies coming up every day now, their speed is just unbelievable. And I think that because of the speed of technology, it just doesn't make sense, thinking back again about the two facts I gave you all about the number of braille signs out there and the effectiveness of them. How could that make sense? I mean, if you have so much better solutions, there's just no other reason why not having them. By the way, when you're comparing, a lot of times when people ask us about, the cost, and we'll get to that later, when you're comparing accessibility of audible type of aids, like audible wayfinding system accessibility, when you're comparing them to other accessibility efforts, whether if it's an elevator, for example, it's just non-comparable. Just non-comparable. So requesting this or requiring this is just, for me, sounds obvious. Another reason, that's the third and last for this part, is the increasing in awareness and inclusion and accessibility. The more awareness we see around it, the more efforts are being made. So I think that's pretty obvious. The reason I put here this picture of a McDonald's restaurant that is accessible with our system is because every new brand or public space that join our specifically RightHear revolution or any other audible wayfinding system helps increasing the awareness around that need. So I can share with you that from our experience, usually after completing successfully projects, because for example, here we've done all of McDonald's restaurants in Israel, probably usually immediately after that, they kind of generate some content around it, they promote it, they advertise this, and that helps to create the awareness around the new possibilities of audible wayfinding system, not just among other public spaces, but also among our users, which is equally important, and we'll get to that a bit later. Moving on. So now that we have the different, we have the awareness, and we understand that there is a technology exists, and there is everything in place. So what type of positioning technologies, or what do we need in terms of technology, to be a bit technical, to have that in place? So basically, when we think about audible wayfinding systems, we need two layers. One is the positioning layer, and secondly is the mapping layer. I would like to address the positioning first, and then the mapping. So for the positioning, there are different technologies, a lot of technologies. I kind of focused on three of them. I know there's also ultra wideband, which didn't include here, and RFID, and there are different technologies for positioning. I kind of put these three main technologies just because, as far as I know, they are the most common at the moment in the market, the most common options that are available. So one is iBeacon technology, which I'll explain in a second. The second one is Wi-Fi, and thirdly is computer vision. I can talk a bit about each one of the technologies, the cons and the pros and cons of each one of them, why each one is better than the other or worse than the other. All of them have some advantages and disadvantages. But to try to summarize it up for this talk today, I've made this quick table. So basically, there are the good and the bad, right? The good thing about iBeacon is its accuracy, and that it's relatively cost effective. It's not a very expensive technology. The good thing about Wi-Fi, you know what, I'll just say, that's the good thing about iBeacon. The bad thing about iBeacon is that it's maximum infrastructure. You have to have a lot of these beacons usually in your building. That's obviously have some strains with that. It can take more of maintenance, more of work, more of labor, more of mapping. So that's the bad part of it. Another technology is Wi-Fi. With Wi-Fi, there's minimum infrastructure. You need to have a few routers in place, not tens or more than that of beacons. That's a good thing about Wi-Fi. The bad thing about it is its accuracy and sometimes the cost. Thirdly, there is the computer vision. And with the computer vision, the good thing about it, there's no infrastructure, nothing at all. But the bad thing about it is its accuracy. And another point is its privacy. Now, again, as I said, I can talk long about these different technologies. There are different use cases also. So for each use case, there are different technologies that might be fit. So that, not saying that this technology is better than the other. None of them is better than the other. It just really depends what exactly is that audible wayfinding system trying to do. Mentioning privacy, I do want to address that a little bit. Here's me in the picture with Google Glass a few years ago. I was trying that and playing with it a little bit. And there's a few privacy issues that can occur with computer vision. One of that is obviously if a person would like to go to a restrooms, right? When its camera is open, I'm not sure that the other people at the restroom would like to stay there. So that's a privacy issue, not necessarily for the user, but for his surroundings. And another question that it brings up, and it's for us to think of, is if relying on, because we've seen some computer vision or I would say camera-based solution that are relying on another person on the other side that kind of describe what is there for you. It's a question of thinking, is it really accessibility? I mean, if I'm getting instructions from someone somewhere else, is that truly accessibility? The whole goal, again, is being independent, being able to go wherever I like by myself without anyone else. I guess also without anyone else, even if remotely. right? So something to think about. The next layer is the mapping. Mapping is a challenge. Mapping is, I would say, maybe even a bigger challenge. There are so many buildings, so many, indoor environments out there. Each one is different. Each one is planned different, and we need to map them somehow. So on the left side, I've put this, this Google camera tool. I don't know how they call it. I think the tracker, where they used to go with that everywhere and kind of map the world with it. I guess they're doing a pretty good job with that, but there's still a lot of more locations. I have no idea if and when they will finish that, because buildings keep on growing all the time. So that's, I would say, one of the biggest challenges in this domain. We know that Google, Apple, and all the big players are working on different technologies, different methodologies or methods to map the world. I might mention another technology called LiDAR that is doing it nowadays. Sounds promising, but still, even with the best technology, you have to go to that place first to map it out, unless you might already have the mapping of it and the building can just share it out. And for that part, I can share with you this slide. So what we see in this slide is just a normal layout of a venue. And the mapping that we do at RightHear when we get such a mapping. Okay, so when we get such a layout, the process of mapping it is usually, at least in our case, is the first part. Mapping the venue and understanding where are the main points of interest, where are the main points of decision making at the venue. This is where we would like to make sure that a blind person, a person with visual impairment, or anyone basically will be able to know and understand where he is, what is there, and what's around him. This is an evacuation plan, by the way. So we can think about, the implementations of emergency, by the way. In emergency cases, it's obviously important that everyone will know what is the shortest way to walk away. Yeah, I won't hold us too long about this unless any of you have questions on that. Moving on. Let's talk about the opportunity or the opportunities of the new reality. I put here 3 pictures of good friends, also our users. On the left side is Adi. Adi is a software engineer and is also happened to be blind. Actually, in the middle, it's another person named Adi. We have 2 Adi here, and in the middle, it's Adi with his dog in a pharmacy, and on the right side, we have Karina at a bus station. I want to kind of share with you short stories about each one of the pictures we see here. So on the left side is with Adi. Adi is in this picture is in our office. When I ask Adi, what is your biggest challenge at work? Again, he is a software engineer. He tells me, well, finding the office, finding the restrooms, finding the elevators, finding the, whatever it is in that building. And for me, it always sounds absurd. How such a talented, such a smart person who can, do things that I cannot do online and with his computer, doing the simple things of life, of like finding a certain space, certain destination in the venue, is still challenging for him. So I'm so happy that we have him in their team to help us understand the need and as well as the solutions for these needs. On the middle, we have the other Adi, Nathan, with his dog, with his guiding dog at the pharmacy. The headline is the opportunities of the new reality. As for today, if a blind person would like to go to the pharmacy and purchase a certain medication or a certain item, he will probably need to go with somebody. Being able to do that by himself, and that could be at the pharmacy or in any other place, is, I think, a huge change of independence in his daily lives. And thirdly, we see here Karina at the bus station. All the bus stations here in Israel are already mapped within the RightHear system. So being able to go wherever you like by bus without the need of anyone else, again, is crucial and is important. Cameron, I think I see another 2 comments in the chat.
Yeah, we're good. We're going to hold that to the end.
Okay, cool. Great. So let's elaborate a little bit more about that. So the first kind of case study I can share with you is with Clockwork. Clockwork is an office space, in a shared office space in France. They turned their shared office space into accessible environment with the system. And I would like to bring that as a case study because think about the opportunities in the workforce, right? In the workplace. I mentioned Adi earlier. He's a talented, brilliant software engineer, but how can you really expect him to work for you if the simple things like finding your office at the building is still a huge challenge? I mean, I believe there's a lot of discussions in the recent years. I know about great lectures we have and discussions we have in this specific meetup group about online accessibility, which is obviously super important. But how can you really expect a blind employee to work on his computer if he's not even know where his desk is? I mean, for me, I believe that's one of the basics we should make sure as a workforce that are there to really provide that accessible experience for that specific employee in person. So back to this case study, Clockwork installed the system just before Corona, so it's really hard to understand, the results of what has been done there. Sorry for not being able to share with you because of that, but this is the first shared office space that put this audible wayfinding system in place, and that's a great statement. That's a great way to increase the awareness that I mentioned earlier. Moving on to another example. So this is a picture of RightHear sticker, the badge on a small restaurant in San Diego, and next to the TripAdvisors and Yelp and other type of stickers at the entrance to this restaurant. And you might think of yourself, well, why would a restaurant, and I mentioned earlier McDonald's, would need an audible wayfinding system? That's such a small layout. Why do they even need that? Well, the answers for that is that for many people, whether if it's a huge complex or a very small environment, that's still a maze. They have no idea where they are. So knowing that you are at that specific restaurant, knowing the open hours, knowing different information, like here in Israel, for example, whether if it's kosher or not, and all that type of information when you're there is just making life much better. Another thing is knowing what is around you, knowing where the sitting area, knowing where the restrooms are, knowing where the counter is and exit and so forth. Super important. So the way we think about this, as I said earlier, is in a way some sort of an audible ramp for those who need that. And whether if it's a huge complex like an airport, we also have done airports or a hospital, or whether if it's just a small mom and pop shops, that equally should be accessible with audible descriptions. And lastly, there is the universal design aspect of this in terms of the opportunities of audible wayfinding systems is the universal aspect. In the picture now, we see Ohad. Ohad is also a good friend and he's on wheelchairs. And one of the things we learned together with him is the importance and the functionalities that can happen with a simple feature as call for local assistant. In the picture, you see Ohad in a supermarket. We've turned Israel's largest supermarket chain accessible with the system. And because one of the features is calling for local assistance, someone in the store for some sort of assistant, we learned from him that that could be very helpful when you want to reach a highest shelf. So you might say, well, why would you need a audible wayfinding system for that? So obviously there are some implications of the system that not necessarily in terms of wayfinding, but are still helpful in terms of accessibility in the built environment. And that just was one of them, being able to call for someone at the store instead of going to Google, search for this brand, and then their contact, and then someone in the office. But you're probably familiar with that annoying process. let's talk now that we discussed the Cameron.
Hey, Idan.
Yeah,
Yeah,
sure.
just pause for a second if you don't mind. I have a
Sure.
couple questions that I
Sure.
think are timely. One is about Israel's infrastructure for physical accessibility now. Anna was asking about, what sort of accommodations there are. I'm also curious about what it seems like Israel is pretty progressive with regards to accessibility of physical spaces. That might be a more elaborate topic, but maybe you can speak specifically to physical spaces, what kind of accommodations there are.
Well, I can try to answer that, and I haven't said that in the beginning, but it's another important disclaimer. Although I'm kind of almost 5 years in this domain, I always feels like I know nothing about it. It's such a big domain, a lot of things going on with it, and we kind of narrow into, our niche within the accessibility in general. So I'm not sure I'm the right person to answer what type of requirements are there for all type of accessibility, but it is true that Israel is quite progressed with the requirements and obligations that are there. Obviously, the awareness is very, very high for that. And yeah, I think I'm not sure, like in terms of physical disabilities, I'm not sure I have like something. I mean, the ramps, of
You
course.
see like tactile signage and tactile markings on the street. I mean, ramps seems like something that we take for granted in the States, even though can't really take it for granted.
Right. So yeah, you find all of these also, like for all different disabilities, you'll find different requirements in the regulations. Yeah, for wheelchairs. Again, I think one of the reasons it's progress is because it actually have, I would say, a meaningful part for the blind and visually impaired. It's not just the braille and tactile paving. Is more than that. And it is specifically, I think it's required in more locations or more places that it's usually required in other countries. I'll give you an example. You know what? It reminds me of an example. So we had this partner in Florida who's a person who's blind. And when he visit London, and he talked to me and tell me, it was 2 years ago, and he told me, hey, I had a great experience in London. When you go to the rail station, there is someone there that is taking you from the platform all the way to the train, and then when you stop in the next stop, there is someone that take you from the train outside of the station. Amazing. And I was really surprised, asking him, what is it so special about it? This is what we have here for years. And he's like, well, we don't have anything like that in the US. So I'm like, oh,
no.
What do you have? So his answer when I asked him, what do you have? So he said, well, there might be someone who will tell you, well, it's there. It's over there. I'm like, oh, okay. Well, obviously it was a funny answer for him. But yeah, I guess there are a lot of things that I probably take for granted, but are unique. But it was one example. Here in Israel, by the way, in the trains, if a blind person want to go from one place to another, it can call and kind of they'll make sure there is someone that is waiting for him, taking him from the station to the train and vice versa. And as I said, that's partially accessible because, again, it's all about providing independence, right? Not being relying on someone else. And I'm happy to say that they are working with us to kind of improve that as well.
Awesome. Thank you.
Cool. So may I move on forward, or there are more questions?
Yeah, there are more questions, but we can save them for later.
Sure. All right. So now that we kind of discussed a little bit about the opportunities, let's discuss a little bit about the challenges of this new reality. I would like to kind of address maybe two main of them, main challenges. First is the standards. There are different standards. When we started, and it's still a discussion that's been around about the technology, different beacons, different Wi-Fi, different technologies means different standards. So what would happen if a user would go with that app, which won't support this technology, or with this technology that won't support that app? Obviously, the goal is to have the same, I would say, standard for all, so all could utilize that and enjoy it. That's obviously a challenge. I don't think it's solved yet. I also must say that I don't think it's that big of a challenge. It's something that, it's more of tomorrow's challenge. For me, I believe the bigger challenge as for today is the awareness, is the regulation, is the cost sometime. But standards are also important. And one aspect of the standards, of the different standards, is from the technology side. This is the left side of the slide right now. And the other challenge of the standard is with the audio descriptions themselves. So assuming that we have the same beacons, for example, the same Wi-Fi or the same protocols in all venues across the country, what would be the audible descriptions that will be heard to the user? This is something to be standardized, to be as a standard as well. It might be the time to mention two things. One is Wayfinder. Wayfinder is a global standard, international standard that has also been accredited, if I'm not wrong, from the ITU, which basically gives guidelines of how to describe the built environment for a blind or visually impaired person. Think about that. There is a standard for that, right? Remember when I said that I believe that in 2025, we'll find audible wayfinding systems all around us? So here we go. We're already creating the standards for that. There are challenges with this standard. I can tell you as a Hebrew speaker that many of the guidelines not necessarily fixed with other languages in the way it's structured. But yeah, there is a beginning of that, and it's interesting to see where it's heading. The second thing I wanted to mention is this dashboard that we have. We have an illustration of RightHear's portal, which basically allows us and the venues to, and hopefully in the future, the audio descriptions specialist, that would be a new role, as I believe, in the future. Remember that, audio descriptions for the built environment specialist. We already have that for, for theater or for TV shows or movies. But how about the built environment? We're going to have that type of specialist soon, as I believe. So here's a tool for them. Our online dashboard is a tool to write and edit all these audible descriptions for each point of interest at the venue. Another challenge is the cost, obviously. So when talking about the cost, there is two audiences we have to keep in mind. So one is the venues. There's, just like with many other accessibility solutions, beautiful accessibility solutions, a lot of times the ROI questions is in the air. So if I'm a supermarket or if I'm a shopping mall, why should I have that? What is the ROI? How many people with that audible wayfinding system should I expect to see a return on my investment? That's a hard question. That's a challenge that not necessarily will happen in the near years. And therefore, there is some sort of challenge for the cost. Those who can offer that in a most cost-effective way will win. But still, it's a question or a challenge that I guess venues will ask themselves, what do they have their return, at least until the time that it will be required, as mentioned earlier. On the other hand, we have our users. What about them? What the cost for them? So there are different, as I said, audible wayfinding systems out there nowadays. Some of them cost, some of them for free, just like RightHear. And what I've put here is an infographic, a short infographic out of a blog post that we wrote recently. You can find it in our blog, at righthere.com, right-here.com, about a survey that we've done. Whether audible wayfinding system should be free, how important is it for users? As you can see, the answers are pretty obvious. We've asked over 100 people from all around the world, mostly people who are blind or visually impaired. And the main majority of that say that yes, it should be free. I'll give you my own opinion. Absolutely, it should be free, just like a person on wheelchair do not need to pay for the ramp. Back again to the metaphor. Why would a blind person should be paying to access a certain location or just for walking in the street? It's for me, this doesn't make sense. We have to find a solution for that as society. It's our all interest that everyone will feel equally included. Moving on. And I think I'm about to kind of wrap up. Yeah, I think that would be the wrap up. Two main. I know. I know. I think it's been less than an hour. So Cameron, I hope you're not mad. But it's two suggested takeaways from this talk, and then I'm really happy to kind of hear you in the audience. One is that audible wayfinding systems should and will be everywhere. I think why it should be everywhere, we all understand. But as I said, I believe it will also be everywhere. And secondly, is that awareness and professional activism, as they call it, is key to overcome the challenges. There are different, just like with any opportunity in the market, and we also see that online happening with online accessibility and with other areas. We have to make sure as the professionals in this domain that we are active and saying what we believe in, so it will be structured right, and the decisions that will be made, whether from the policy decision making or for different private sector that will decide to go with one solution or another, the decision will be made right and according to principles of accessibility and independence. Yes, so this is my email, and I'm also on LinkedIn and Twitter, and now I can stop sharing. No, I'll keep it for a few more seconds, and I'm happy.
No, leave it up.
Yeah, happy to answer and hear your thoughts.
Awesome. Thank you, Idan. Just for the caption, for the record, it's Idan, IDAN, at right-hear.com. And then Idan _Meir on Twitter. Sorry, go ahead, Idan.
Just here, AGAR.
Oh, right.
Yeah. RIGHT-AGAR.com.
Great. Thank you, Idan. And I have a couple of questions queued up. One of the points that Monica made, or I guess questions she had, was around involving people with disabilities in your research and engaging the disabled community in iterating and enhancing your product, and
of course,
for that matter, building your product.
Absolutely. So one of the things we've learned from our very early days is that because we get to that by luck, as I said, we're not coming from that background, is that it's super important for us to have those who understand the need deeply will be involved in every step we do. As the phrase said, nothing about us without us. So obviously it's the same things goes with building products. And I can even share with you today that one of the reasons we call ourselves RightHear, it's just like like an internal secret, if you like, is that the right thing for us to do as a company is to hear the audience, to hear the feedback, to hear the experts. So it's kind of self-reminder for us as a company. Everyone in the team knows that. So absolutely, there are people with different disabilities involved in the process, from the planning to the hands-on developing of it. This is one of them. I hope that's answered.
That's awesome. Follow up on that. What sort of platforms or tools do you use to engage with audiences? I know that this is sort of an ongoing quandary for a lot of businesses and consultancies. Is like, how do you engage the disability community?
I'm so happy for this question, because that was a huge challenge for us in the first 3 years. In the past, because I can share with you, for example, we've done 3 years ago or something like that, we've done a meetup for people who are blind or visually impaired to come and share with us, and try some of the things we've developed. And it was so challenging to organize that event. First, from finding a location that is fully accessible. I mean, even in a country like Israel, it was really hard to find a location that is accessible from all angles, as he said, in terms of public transportation, all the way for different disabilities. And then actually managing that type of event was a challenge. And then in the past year, and I have to say thank you, Corona, for that. And that's really a few things I can thank the COVID-19 for. But this is absolutely one of them. You know, year and a half ago, 2 years ago, we started to kind of create online meetings, like just like this one, and we invited our users. Hey, there is an online meetup we're going on, and please come on this day, that hour. It's going to be virtual. And people ask us, well, okay, but where is this happening? Well, it's virtual. Yes, but what should we tell to the taxi driver? What's the address? Well, it's virtual, and they didn't get that. They didn't get that. But in the past year, we all live in Zoom or any other different, conference video tool. So in the past year, and we kind of catch that early in the days, we started to use these platforms, and I can tell you that we are meeting with our mostly Israeli community on a weekly basis. Every week, usually it's on Monday, 5 p.m. Israel time, we are meeting and discussing different topics regarding accessibility, actually. And it's just rapidly grown our community, and mostly we learn a lot from that every time.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, a note on that actually is that Zoom and BlueJeans have made really pretty active efforts around accessibility in their platform. Trying to think, I'm not sure about Google Meet and others, but I know that BlueJeans got acquired by Verizon, so it's important when you're doing this kind of research to know, are the tools that you're using accessible themselves.
Yeah, and I must say, Cameron, what's beautiful about it is that from like we've been running 3 years, having hard times of just gathering in the same room, a 30 or 50 people who are blind and visually impaired. And in the past year, we've been doing that on a weekly basis. Sometimes there are 100 people in the room. That's never happened before. And that's by the way, that's another trigger for what, as I said before, for accessibility. Finally, the voice is being heard.
One question I have, this is the New York City Accessibility Meetup. I'm curious how you see these your application and other technologies you talked about applying in New York City.
Wow. I feel it like it could be, as I said earlier, in so many locations. And happily we've been reached out. I've talked about the increase of the need in the past year. We've never done anything from a marketing perspective in the past year in terms of promoting RightHear online, but still we're breaking records on visitors and inbound leads every month. On a month over month, there are more and more. Many of them have recently come also from the New York area, and specifically some of them in New York City, which will just show that there is more awareness, there is more interest, there is more demand, I would say, for this type of solutions. So yeah, I feel like it can be applicable in all type of venues. I guess we have here in the audience different professionals that work for different organizations, different businesses in the area. Yeah. We still don't have our first location in this area, unfortunately, but maybe thanks to one of the participants here, we'll have our first audible wayfinding installed location in New York City. So
yeah,
crossing my fingers.
That's great. One question that came up from Jean. Sean, you asked about wayfinding for elevator buttons. That in particular, that's a very specific challenge, but a common one. Idan, how do you see that level of, I guess, resolution or granularity fitting into these indoor wayfinding tools?
Yeah, I think I have a beautiful answer for that. So remember when we talk about the speed of technology, there are elevators manufacturers around the world. We are communicating with one of them that now also connect the elevator to the cloud. What that help us is that we can basically call for the elevator through our smartphone. How cool is that? I mean, awesome. Imagine that if we already know that you're at the entrance to that building, right? Because you work there and you're using this system. And we already know that you're working on the 3rd floor. How about we'll already order the elevator for you? That will be for the 3rd floor. So here's some example, and I can share with you that we're working on things in the area of that, and I guess we're not the only one. But this is another example of how the technology is involving in these areas as well. So in terms of, I believe that, again, in the next few years, we'll see tremendous development that the technology have to offer, where the braille or the tactile type of buttons will still be there, but because of it's a public surface that not many people. By the way, just the common people, nobody really want to touch the buttons and the elevators anymore. Yeah, that's the type of Well, I do it with my smartphone, just like this. I just point with the corner of my smartphone on the button, just not want to touch it. So nobody want to touch it anymore. So if you can just order it through your smartphone, that's convenient.
Super interesting. So we've got a couple more minutes. I'm actually curious. I haven't seen any other questions come up right in the chat, but I have a couple more questions.
Please.
The issue that you described, shoot, I lost it.
Okay,
I was thinking about standards is one thing. So you mentioned standards and having open standards. How do open standards apply to RightHear's model? Like if you're mapping all this information, is this proprietary? Is it public? Is it in a format that you can export?
It's one of the challenges. As I said, it's one of the challenges because the way I see it, and I hope it will change some way or another in the future. But the way I see it, one of the assets that companies like RightHear and others have is basically that. So it's just like, I feel usually I kind of give the example of the different taxi, on-demand company like Uber, Lyft type of companies. The asset they have is basically their, the drivers and the taxis themselves. Yeah. Once you take it off them, they have nothing special to offer. So a bit similar is the way it is here. If we're gonna share that with the world, what do we have left with us? So it's something we like to do, and we, by the way, in a way, working on doing, but not too much promoting. But as for the current situation, I feel like it's too challenging to deal with, and I feel like that's, as I said earlier, that's more of tomorrow's problem. And the reason is because just like you have areas in the US, correct me if I'm wrong, that are more with Uber or less, or more with Lyft or more with others, you might find the similar things. So there are probably going to be some areas or cities in the US that are more RightHear enabled, and others that are more something else enabled, for example, and that's fine.
Wrong here.
Not here. Well, there are other. I have to say, there are other great solutions in the market.
Sure.
It's not like it's an aggressive competition around here. I mean, great communications with all the rest of the CEOs of this landscape, and they're doing great work around that. So I think. And I feel like it's okay, like having this major dominator in this area and in another area. I feel like the market is big enough, and as long as it doesn't cost anything, that's important. That as long as it doesn't cost anything to the end user, all right.
That's awesome. Okay, well, we're at 3 o'clock. We're welcome to stick around for a few more minutes if you like, but I wanted to say thank you again to Equal Entry for sponsoring the meetup, and to the Internet Society of New York. Jolly's generous with his expertise and time, and to Diane with White Coat Captioning, doing an amazing job with the captions, and to everyone that joined us today. So thanks again, and stick around if you'd like. We can take a couple more questions, but I'd also like to encourage you to join us on the meetup group and on Twitter, A11yNYC. If you Google that, you'll find us on all the things. Thanks again.
Yeah. And
Idan, can you stick around for 5 minutes?
Sure. More than that, even more than that. And
okay,
I just
cool.
want to invite also anyone who want to kind of even talk with me directly afterwards. I'm happy to do that. My email is just on the screen.
Cool. Yeah, super interesting. And
I think Kim,
one of the questions.
Kim, do you want
go
to
ahead.
ask anything? Yeah, here you go.
Yes.
Are you referring to me? Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Kim Polk? Yes, so that was great. I was concerned about two important things as a user. One is how I will know as I go to any location which tool is being used, which app is being used. And the other was how do I aim my